Greetings everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Today I wanted to talk about a man and an artist who is more commonly associated with the true crime scene as opposed to the music scene. Who could that man be, of course? Well, we are talking about Bobby Beausoleil, and at least in this particular video, we are talking about his 2005 compilation, Dreamways of the Mystic. Now, there's quite a bit that can be said about Bobby Beausoleil. I'm not by any means going to go into all of it. Google, Wikipedia, they're going to be your best friends here, but I'll give you the basics. So, in the late 60s, Bobby Beausoleil was one of Charles Manson's associates, or henchmen, or perhaps just one of his followers that he trusted with bigger tasks and duties within the Manson family. And if you've never really gone down the rabbit hole of exploring the Manson cult, I think you definitely owe it to yourself, because it is extraordinarily fascinating, the manipulative power he had over everyone involved in the cult, and just the fact that they would bend to his every will and would do anything that he said. So in August of 1969, Bobby Beausoleil carried out an order for Manson to go to Gary Hinman's house and collect a matter of money that Manson felt that he owed him. When Hinman refused, things got ugly to say the least. Apparently Beausoleil stabbed him, and then some of Beausoleil's associates that he brought with him tortured Gary Hinman for multiple days before finally stabbing him to death and then muffling him, suffocating him with a pillow. And apparently also Manson at some point himself showed up with either a katana or a bayonet or something and slashed Gary Hinman in the face and nearly cut his ear off too, so it's a pretty grisly scene, I guess, to say the least. But subsequently, Bobby Beausoleil got charged with first-degree murder and was originally sentenced to death in the California penal system. However, in 1972, his sentence was commuted, I believe is the word, to just a life sentence because, they did away with the death penalty in California. So with that being said, how does Bobby Beausoleil come to be associated with music, or more specifically in this context, how does he become associated with dark ambient music? Well, to be fair, Bobby Beausoleil has never composed, straightforward dark ambient music as we know it today, but there's certainly shades of dark ambient music within his music. And I guess even before Bobby Beausoleil's involvement in the Manson family, he had some musical projects, some basically psychedelic rock bands. I guess he was an early member of the band Love, which was one of Arthur Lee's bands, and if you've never heard Love, I highly recommend it. It's an incredible psychedelic rock album from, I believe, from 65 or 66, really good stuff. I don't know that Bobby Beausoleil actually recorded anything with him, but he was an early member. And then after that, he went on to a band called The Orchestra, which I guess as well was a psychedelic rock band, which probably was very influential, but I don't think the recordings got released until several years later. So after being convicted and spending a few years in jail, sometime in the early 70s, film director Kenneth Anger approached Beausoleil about doing the soundtrack to his then new movie called Lucifer Rising. Kenneth Anger is a pretty experimental and important film director, as he had a very, unique touch and just a very experimental approach to his films, as well as he was one of the very first, if not the first, openly gay film director. And I guess, although I haven't seen any of his movies, I guess he had a lot of homoeroticism in his movies too, which was a very, very taboo thing back in like the 50s, 60s, and 70s and so on. And I guess really, if you think about it, it's still kind of a taboo thing all these years later too. So after accepting the offer to compose the soundtrack for Anger's film, Beausoleil, along with some other inmates, basically recorded this soundtrack together. And the soundtrack is a very interesting mixture of sort of space rock, psychedelic rock, and something kind of similar to early Tangerine Dream, sort of that krautrock, heavy synthy stuff, and a very otherworldly, very mystical sound, and it's a really, really good soundtrack. And this sort of is the groundwork for all of Beausoleil's later on solo recordings. The Lucifer Rising official soundtrack wouldn't get released until 1980, and over the years Beausoleil has had sporadic output, probably because he is still in jail. Now, Beausoleil's been in jail since 1969, and during that time period, he's had no less than 19 parole hearings. He's now 75 years old. And the reason why it's kind of important to mention that he's had parole hearings and why people have tried to get him freedom is because, unlike a lot of the people associated with the Manson cult, he wasn't batshit crazy. He was just a young, rebellious man who basically kind of got involved in something he shouldn't have gotten involved with. And it's a tragic shame because he was extraordinarily talented. He could play guitar really well, he could do keyboards, he was a visual artist, he did paintings and drawings, and he also had a small little acting career too, before all this madness with Manson went down. So yeah, Bobby's been in jail since 1969. All of his parole hearings have been denied, and it's sort of a controversial thing because, like I said, unlike his other Manson associates, he wasn't batshit crazy. He's done a lot of productive things with his life. He's given back to the community. He's done all this art, this music, and if you ever read interviews with him or his writings, he comes off as a very intelligent individual. I think that's really admirable and really different from a lot of just, you know, murderers or whatever kind of criminals. I mean, a lot of criminals, a lot of murderers, they always play the blame game. They always want to point at someone that, like, well, if she hadn't done that, if she hadn't said that, or if he hadn't stolen the money from me, or he hadn't done this, then I wouldn't have had to kill him. But Beausoleil's never done that. He's always had remorse for his crimes, and he's apologized, and he realized that he fucked up, but he was only 22 years old at the time, and, you know, it's just one of those things that happen. I mean, these kind of things happen to a lot of people when they're young. You know, when you're still that age, you don't think right. And just, you know, if you get involved with something like Charles Manson, then there was a lot of thinking that was not going right. So anyway, then let's fast forward to about 2005-2006 time frame. An associate of mine who was named Kenneth Anger, she was writing for my zine back then named Lunar Hypnosis, and she approached me one day about, well, basically sending me a copy of this CD. And when she first told me about it, she told me that she had done an interview for this CD, and that, you know, basically she just wanted me to have a copy of the interview and a copy of the CD because she really enjoyed this music. She wanted me to know more about, you know, Bobby Beausoleil and, you know, his life and everything. And at the time, I honestly didn't know shit about Bobby Beausoleil. All I knew that about Bobby Beausoleil was that it was the name of some weird Kurt 93 song from like 1988 that was like the most hopped up acid madness I've ever heard in my entire life. And if you've never heard that song by Kurt 93, I highly recommend looking it up. But that's another story entirely. So this was my introduction to Bobby Beausoleil's music, and I absolutely loved it. So yeah, I know what you're thinking. Is this dark ambient music? Well, no, not really. But is there sort of examples of dark ambient in this? Absolutely. There are some very dark and haunting moments and stuff, but all these songs have a much more of a sort of normal song structure to them, or maybe more of a soundtrackish kind of vibe to them. But there's definitely some dark ambient feels here, and there's more some drone characteristics. There's also some stuff in here that would, you know, maybe more nowadays be considered like dungeon synth. You know, it's all over the place. There's also like some sort of like jazz fusion kind of stuff going on. There's like some Middle Eastern kind of vibes, with some really interesting percussion. I mean, Bobby Beausoleil was a really talented musician, and it's just such a shame that all this had to happen to him, and that, you know, as much as he's tried to, you know, get a parole out of prison all these years, it's just he has had no luck. And I mean, as I said, he's now 75 years old, and he's really running out of time, but it seems pretty likely he's going to spend his entire life in jail. So then just take a little closer look at the artwork of this digipack. All of the artwork, of course, was done by Beausoleil himself. He's a pretty incredible painter. I mean, he's not by any means the greatest I've ever seen, but, you know, I think it's amazing to me that someone was able to find light in all the darkness of prison. I mean, all like the hatred and the frustration's gotta come out of being, you know, a convict, you know, in that system. And just, I mean, unbelievable that he's been able to persevere through a lot. He hasn't allowed his hatred to take him over, and his anger and all that kind of stuff. So, like I said, this was originally sent to me by my old associate, Kenneth Anger. And Corinne, if you're out there somewhere, you know, thank you so much. It's been a long time since you sent this to me, and I lost contact with her shortly after this because she had told me she had cancer, and then I just never really heard from her after that. And I hope she didn't pass away, but if you are, if that's true, Corinne, well, thank you so much for the CD, because I've kept it all these years later. Well, anyway, there's another look at there's another look at the booklet and more of Beausoleil's paintings. And here we have in here a little writing for Michael Moynihan from Blood Axis. And we get into the interview that Corinne mentions in here, or has in here. And I have no idea how she got this interview. I don't know if it's, you know, it's a simple matter to just email people in jail and you can do interviews. I don't know, I guess I never really gave it much thought or whatever. Send them a letter in the mail. I don't know. But yeah, I mean, lots of talent here. It's just, what a shame, man. I mean, but yeah, like I said, it's great that he's been able to find some sort of positivity and been able to shine a very bright star in all that darkness, man. I mean, it's a shame that, the governor of California, or just, the system in general in California, sees him as this monster, as this crazy person and all this stuff. I mean, people that murder people, yes, they do oftentimes go to jail for many, many years, but I think it's like, just because of his association with Manson, it was turned into a life sentence, whereas if, it had been someone else, some other just thing, it would have been like 25, 30 years in jail, but just because of that association with Charles Manson, it took his whole life from him. So yes, this isn't by any means the most typical sounding dark ambient music out there. It definitely offers a more melodic touch in this. There are some guitars and some jazzy parts and Middle Eastern parts and all that kind of stuff. And if I had to compare it to anything, I'd probably compare it to like early Tangerine Dream or Klaus Schulze, stuff like that. But for sure, those dark ambient characteristics are there, and I think it's very interesting just hearing, older music that has, these sort of, small seeds of what later on would become dark ambient music. And, Bobby Beausoleil is not someone that, a lot of people would associate with dark ambient music, but it's definitely there, man. And I just think it's really fascinating that, this guy was making this music all the way back in the early 70s, and it's there, man. It's like, you can trace dark ambient music back so far, and it's so interesting just going down that rabbit hole and just kind of pinpointing where it all started. And a lot of people always just think like, oh yeah, early 70s, but sometimes you can go even beyond that. It's fascinating. I just love going down those rabbit holes of, figuring out where, the genres had their birth and where it started, and just as it evolved over the years. It's such fascinating stuff. So anyway, that is Mombi Beausoleil. This is Dreamways of the Mystic. A really cool compilation. And, as I said, you get a cool interview and 2 CDs of music. It's about 2 hours. And I mean, if you want a little more melodic, dark ambient or ambient music, well, you can't go wrong with this. So yeah, Mombi Beausoleil, Dreamways of the Mystic.